My name is Ben, and I'm here to talk about Magento 2. It's a pretty popular topic for us these days because it's basically we're all in. I would actually like to get a quick check of hands. How many people are actually doing client work with Magento 2 right now? Okay, that is an increasing number. I've watched this number, this percentage rise over the course of the year, which is good, because going the other way would be, well, not good. How many of you are just investigating Magento 2? Okay, come find me after class. I want to see how it's going. All of you who've put your hands up. So I'd say there's been a lot of great content so far. I'm really happy that this event here is in Austin and that we can have so many people from our team here, not just on stage to kind of share what they know, but also out walking around during the breaks and talking with each of you about what we're doing. And regarding what we're doing, this is my idea for a presentation was just to talk about how we're making that transition from M1 to M2, and then from M2 into the future. So that's my contact information. If you get nothing else out of the presentation, please take that down. My job is to be very contactable for all of you. So if you need anything, any kind of pointers, if you want to connect with someone on our team, if you need me to buy you a pizza and bring it over, whatever we can do to kind of make your development life a little easier, that's why I'm out here. So we've come a long way. I've heard several stories from people here so far, talking about, I got started in 2008. Matthew Bean on the panel, I think, was saying this. I myself started in 2008, back when it was the Wild West of whatever the hell works, right? The development methodology from those days was just like, try and break Magento by changing this here, and you get an error message, and that was the biggest success of the day, just because we didn't exactly have documentation back then. So I'd say we've come a long way. The timeline that we've been operating on, you can see it stretches all the way across the screen. Conveniently. It's not to scale. Magento 1 development, that started essentially like December 2006, really got underway beginning of 2007. That's a long time ago, right? And pretty much everything about the way PHP developers work, and certainly the way consumers and merchants expect to do commerce online, that's all changed quite a lot since then. And actually it will change more into the future, and we actually brought Steve Yankovic out. He will be talking about kind of the vision there later on. It's been a number of years, and you can see last November we finally got Magento 2 shipped after a former CTO, who shall remain unnamed, promised it, I think, back in 2010. But the Magento 2 that we put out, I'd say we started working in earnest with our developer community as early as December of 2014, and we spent our time. We had product forums. We had deeper interaction. That was actually the time that we made the transition where we were actually accepting pull requests on GitHub, and it took us a lot of work to actually enable interaction on GitHub. And the curious thing is, we knew that we needed to do this, right? It's the open thing to do. We knew that there was a lot of value in having this communication with you guys and gals. But as it turns out, there's a lot of communication on GitHub, right? There's a lot going on there. I finally just unwatched it. I just check in every once in a while because I kept having to clear 300 notifications a day out of my inbox. It's a good problem to have. A much worse thing would be saying, hey guys, we're on GitHub, and just get nothing but crickets. So we've come a long way, but this journey that we're on, it's far from over. So don't worry, we're not done developing Magento 2 in case this was something that you were concerned about. Our current topics. So I want to give voice to where we are, and so some of you have been engaged with us and have been submitting patches or pull requests, have been submitting your feedback about what does and what doesn't work, and that's fantastic. I mean, Magento 2, when it was released last November, it was a fundamentally different product because of our interaction with you all, and I mean in terms of what we built. And even some of the code that was included in that first GA. So this current era or epoch in Magento's world, Magento's timeline, we are working on a number of things. So behind me, I have a list of these things. Issues and pull requests on GitHub, feature requests, which formerly lived on GitHub, developer experience, developer documentation, and I'll give you all a chance to fire questions my way at the end. My wrist is going crazy here. I should probably turn off Twitter notifications when I'm presenting. So, if you watch, how many of you are like actively following the GitHub for M2? I would expect Max Yekateryanko is, of course. Thank you, Max, chiming in. It's very good. Even if you're lying, you're standing next to like your boss's boss, so that's a really good idea. So issues. So what we did recently, you may have noticed like the count dropped recently. And what happened was we started really digging into. Basically, it's a tough story to tell when people go to look at Magento 2 as a technology, and we have the code out there, we have all our interactions out there, and people see there's like 1,600 issues, right? It wasn't really an accurate issue count. So we went through and we found several hundred feature requests. And actually, the project management superstar, the most senior employee actually at Magento, Peter Kaminsky, he's here. You should give him a hug later, if you haven't already. He kind of set up some tooling, and we were actually able to pull feature requests from GitHub into what we now have as a new subforum on our community forums managed by Sherry. And that is the place for feature requests. So we actually prefer that you don't try and file a feature request on GitHub. Put it over in the product forum. That way people can vote on it, and we can actually track interest, and that helps our team prioritize things. So as far as GitHub goes, though, please do continue to interact with us. So one of the things that we're working on right now, there is a concerted effort, and you will see a dramatic effect over the next month plus. You're going to see that issue count go down rather quickly, right? Because we want to get that down to a managed level and keep it there. So don't hold off just being nice to us. Keep submitting those pull requests. Keep filing issues if you find them. And we are burning those down as quickly as we can. Feature requests, as I mentioned, just go straight over to the forum. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend go there. It's just community.magento.com, and you'll see there the feature request subforum, and just take a look. Take a look at what your fellow developers are prioritizing, what they're voting on. So for developer experience, so this has been a big topic. There's been a really big topic actually since the beta came along, and the story with developer experience is we are prioritizing that right now as well. We want the development experience to be, essentially, we want to make you kind of happy when you fire up your code editor and have to do a task. And so what I've been hearing as I've been going around over the last year or so, the people who are getting into Magento 2 find that it enables a much more professional level of development, but there are some opaque corners. There are some fundamental differences in how, especially if you're a Magento 1 developer, you come in with all sorts of biases. So there's some work for developers to do to kind of get used to how the new system works, right? In terms of, if I'm doing, under what circumstances should I recompile? Under what circumstances should I do static asset deployment while I'm developing? What mode should I be in? How do I troubleshoot? So these are the kinds of things that we're building up documentation for. We are telling those stories. So part of the developer experience improvement effort is actually, well, it starts with working through a lot of these issues on GitHub, because a lot of these issues are impacting the work that developers are doing day to day. Another thing that we've been addressing now for a little while is front-end tech. So we're looking at how to make front-end tech easier for you as developers, right? Because there's a lot going on in there, because Magento has theme inheritance. We've got a lot of new tools for optimizing the communication between the server and client. And part of that is telling that story. So like using Knockout.js, why, how, using UI components. And it's not just enough to have the code base out there and to have some examples in the core code. We're working on documentation. So we have a wonderful documentation team. I know I see at least one team member here, and in fact she just was in Kiev doing a doc sprint. And I'll actually mention that on the next slide. So I would say setting the expectation with you all. Again, if you find anything that you say, hey, I'm working with a team of people and we're having this problem consistently, that's something to put out there on Twitter. That's something to fire my way, fire to anyone you may know on the team, to bring it to our attention. Maybe file an issue on GitHub if you really see it as a core issue. But I would expect improvement over time as we work through these issues, we work through some of the architecture, and we build up documentation. I'd also expect some improvement as your fellow developers continue to build tools. A lot of the boilerplate that is part and parcel of Magento development, a lot of that can be automated, and there are already some great tools out there for building modules that do a lot of the work for you. I think Mage2gen.com is one, and there are several others. So I think you'll see these tools proliferate over time. Another thing that's worth pointing out is Marketplace. How many of you Magento 1 developers spent a not insubstantial part of your time as a developer just making extensions work? Yeah, this is kind of a part of what I remember from when I worked for a living. Now, this is what I remember. When I was at Blue Acorn, this was one of the things. Like, we would get these extensions that would perfectly satisfy, or almost perfectly satisfy client requirements. And maybe there was a little bit glitchy. Maybe they'd never been tested with large data sets. Maybe they would be in combination with other popular extensions. Things would go boom. And what I found as I started going around in this role was that this is how a lot of really, really sharp developers spend their time. And that's not a really good story. So the cool thing that we have with Marketplace is now that we control, like we actually have insight over the code. We can help control that quality. We have better extension quality, which means that extension that you get should do what it advertises it does, and it shouldn't break things. And that's thanks in part to our whole App Store approach. That's also thanks to a code base, the M2 code base, which is much more easy to customize, to enhance, without having to get quite so brutal with like rewrites. So the other important thing that I think for the developers out there is our developer documentation. So as you can see here, let's see if I can hit. I was close. Edit this page on GitHub. That's for you all. It's not for us. As you go through the documentation, you should, if you see a problem, submit a pull request. File an issue. Just let us know about it, at the very least. Our team is quite responsive. I think you actually heard some organic commentary about how readily our documentation team will take your feedback and incorporate it into the docs. Another bit of feedback that we can use, and you can ping Magento Dev Docs on Twitter as well. Say, hey, I am trying to figure out how the ORM works. I don't understand Entity Manager. Tell us that. We can prioritize documentation based on what you're saying. There's a lot of stuff to write. Like, their job is not going to be wrapped up next week or even the week after. And so, as an example, though, of the work that we're doing, not just the work that we're relying on you guys to do, we do have new UI component documentation. It's not 100% complete, I would say, but this was a substantial effort of basically flying our head tech writer to Kiev and like sitting her down, I think probably with Vitaly Koratun? Yep. And Vitaly, he's a character. But sitting him down and basically like generating this documentation. Understanding how UI components work, it's not unlike, those of you who remember, figuring out layout XML, because you hated layout XML until you figured out how it worked. I know that because that happened to me, and it literally happened in all 40 fundamentals classes that I taught. Wednesday was like the day that people figured out layout XML. And I saw a lot of light bulbs go on. I saw a lot of people go, we're going to have to rebuild our whole theme now. But understanding layout XML gives you a lot of power when working with Magento. Understanding UI components, it's the same thing. It's a system that we make, but if you know how to use it, you get a lot of mileage out of it.